Jesse James, born in Missouri in 1847, Jesse James grew up in a slave-owning family with fierce Southern sympathies. As a teenager during the Civil War, he joined a Confederate guerrilla unit that murdered Union soldiers and civilians with brutal efficiency. When the war ended, Jesse refused to accept defeat. He and his brother Frank, along with the younger brothers, formed the James Younger Gang, applying their wartime tactics to a new profession. They became the most notorious outlaws in America, robbing banks, trains, and stagecoaches across the Midwest with military precision. Between 1860 and 1882, they committed over 20 major robberies, stealing an estimated $200,000. Jesse cultivated a Robin Hood image, claiming to rob from corrupt Reconstruction supporters and give to the poor, though evidence of his charity is scarce. A sympathetic newspaper editor helped build his mythology. The Pinkerton Detective Agency made him their primary target, but Jesse evaded capture for years. His downfall came from within. On April 3, 1882, while hanging a picture in his home, Robert Ford, a new gang member seeking reward money, shot Jesse in the back of the head. He was just 34 years old. His death didn't end his legend. It perfected it, making him America's most romanticized outlaw. Billy the Kid, born Henry McCarty in 1859, he became history's most famous teenage outlaw. Orphaned at 15, he committed his first crimes out of desperation, stealing food and robbing a Chinese laundry. He escaped custody twice and fled to Arizona Territory, where he killed a blacksmith in a dispute. He changed his name to William H. Bonney and returned to New Mexico, joining cattle rustlers during the bloody Lincoln County War of 1878. The conflict between rival merchant factions turned him from a hired gun into a wanted man. Legends claim he killed 21 men, one for each year of his life. The reality was probably 9, but the myth was more powerful than truth. His former acquaintance, Sheriff Pat Garrett, was tasked with bringing him to justice. Garrett captured him and he was sentenced to hang, but Billy escaped in stunning fashion, killing 2 deputies and cementing his legendary status. Garrett relentlessly tracked him across New Mexico territory. On the night of July 14th, 1881, Garrett cornered him in a darkened room in Fort Sumner. When a voice asked, "Who is it?" From the darkness, Garrett answered with a single gunshot. Billy the Kid died at 21, but his story was just beginning. Dime novels and sensationalized accounts stripped away the nuance, transforming him into an icon of the Wild West, a symbol of rebellion whose name represents the romanticized frontier. Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, Robert Leroy Parker, born in Utah in 1866 to a Mormon family, became Butch Cassidy. Harry Alonzo Longabaugh became the Sundance Kid. Together they formed the Wild Bunch, the most successful outlaw gang in American history. Butch was charismatic and intelligent, a natural leader who revolutionized train robbery. The Sundance Kid was reputed to be the fastest gunslinger in the West. Starting in the 1890s, they robbed banks and trains across the Rocky Mountains with unprecedented success. Their 1896 robbery of a Montpelier, Idaho bank netted $7,000. A Rio Grande train heist in New Mexico brought in $70,000. They were known for their daring, their code of honor, and treating civilians with respect during robberies. But as law enforcement modernized and the frontier closed, the West became too small for them. In 1901, Butch, Sundance, and his companion Etta Place fled to Argentina, where they set up a ranch. But the outlaw life called them back. They robbed banks and trains across South America until 1908, when most historians believe they died in a shootout with Bolivian soldiers. However, some evidence suggests they escaped and lived under aliases. Their story, immortalized in the 1969 film, represents the end of the Wild West era, when even the most successful outlaws ran out of places to hide. John Wesley Hardin. By his 21st birthday, John Wesley Hardin claimed to have killed 27 men, making him the deadliest gunfighter of the Wild West. Born in 1853 to a Methodist preacher in Texas, Hardin displayed his violent nature early, stabbing a classmate as a schoolboy. At 15, he killed a black man during an argument. As a Confederate supporter, he claimed to have killed multiple Union soldiers during Reconstruction. Over the next 6 years, he cut a bloody path across Texas and beyond. Hardin was fast with a pistol, deadly accurate, and had no qualms about killing. He shot men over card games, personal insults, and perceived slights. He killed lawmen and civilians alike. His reputation grew with each killing. Even Wild Bill Hickok reportedly treated him with caution when they met in Kansas. But in 1877, Texas Rangers finally tracked him to Florida and arrested him. He was convicted of murdering Deputy Sheriff Charles Webb and sentenced to 25 years. He served 17 years, during which he studied law and passed the bar exam. Released in 1894, he attempted to practice law in El Paso, but his violent past followed him. On August 19, 1895, just 1 year after his release, lawman John Selman shot Hardin in the back of the head during a dispute. The deadliest gunman of the West died as violently as he had lived. Ned Kelly. Australia's most famous bushranger, Ned Kelly became a folk hero who challenged British colonial authority in the 1870s. Born in 1855 to Irish convict parents in Victoria, Kelly grew up poor in a lawless frontier community. At 14, he apprenticed with bushranger Harry Power, learning to survive in the Australian bush and evade police. After a confrontation with a police officer in 1878, Kelly and his brother Dan fled to the wilderness, joined by Joe Byrne and Steve Hart. When police tracked them to Stringy Bark Creek, a gunfight erupted. Kelly shot and killed 3 officers. The government declared them outlaws with a 2,000-pound reward. The Kelly gang then embarked on a series of audacious bank robberies. At Euroa, they took hostages and entertained them with trick riding before robbing the bank. At Jerilderie, they held an entire town hostage, cut telegraph wires, and burned mortgage deeds after robbing the bank. Kelly even wrote a famous 8,300-word letter justifying his actions and condemning police treatment of Irish Catholics. Their final stand came in June 1880 at Glenrowan. Kelly famously wore homemade armor weighing 44 kilograms, fashioned from plow parts. In a dawn shootout with 40 police officers, he emerged from the fog like an apparition. Police shot his unprotected legs, bringing him down. His gang died in the siege. Kelly was tried, convicted, and hanged on November 11, 1880, at age 25. His armor and legend endure as symbols of Australian defiance. Belle Starr. In an era dominated by male outlaws, Belle Starr became the bandit queen of the American West. Born Myra Maybelle Shirley, in Missouri in 1848, she grew up on a prosperous plantation during the Civil War. When Union soldiers killed her father, her family was left destitute and moved to Texas. Belle was beautiful, intelligent, and educated, but she was drawn to crime and danger. She eloped with Jim Reed, a known outlaw and Confederate guerrilla. Together they robbed banks, stagecoaches, and trains across the South. Belle earned a reputation as a crack shot and fearless rider, always carrying 2 revolvers and wearing cartridge belts with high-topped boots, yet insisting on riding side saddle like a lady. After Reed was killed in a gunfight in 1864, Belle married several more outlaws, including Sam Starr. They established a cattle rustling operation that gained infamy across Indian Territory. When Sam died in another gunfight, Belle continued her criminal career, associating with notorious outlaws like Jesse James and the Younger Brothers. She regularly harbored fugitives at her ranch, which became known as a haven for wanted men. In 1889, just days before her 41st birthday, Belle was ambushed and killed while riding home from Fort Smith. She was shot twice in the back with a shotgun. Her killer was never identified, though suspects included her son, a neighbor, or one of many enemies. Belle Starr remains one of the few female outlaws whose legend rivals any man's. Pancho Villa Doroteo Arango, known as Pancho Villa, was Mexico's most famous revolutionary and bandit. Born in 1878 to a poor sharecropping family in Durango, Villa killed his first man at 16, allegedly avenging an assault on his sister by shooting a wealthy landowner. He became an outlaw, leading a gang that stole cattle and robbed the rich across northern Mexico. When the Mexican Revolution erupted in 1910, Villa transformed from bandit to revolutionary general. He led the División del Norte, a cavalry army that won stunning victories against federal forces. Villa became a folk hero, Mexico's Robin Hood, redistributing land to peasants and fighting for the poor. At the revolution's peak, he controlled much of northern Mexico, but Villa was also brutal, executing prisoners and enemies without mercy. After political defeats, he returned to banditry and rebellion. In 1916, he raided Columbus, New Mexico, killing 18 Americans in the only foreign attack on the continental United States in the 20th century. President Wilson sent 10,000 troops under General Pershing to capture him, but Villa evaded them for 11 months in the Sierra Madre Mountains. After negotiating amnesty in 1920, Villa retired to a ranch. But on July 20th, 1923, assassins ambushed his car in Parral, firing over 40 bullets. He died instantly at 45. Pancho Villa remains controversial, celebrated as a revolutionary hero by some, condemned as a bandit and murderer by others. Bonnie and Clyde. During the Great Depression, Bonnie Parker and Clyde Barrow became America's most romanticized criminal couple. Clyde, born in 1909 in Texas, grew up desperately poor and turned to crime early, stealing cars and robbing small stores. Bonnie, born in 1910, was a waitress and aspiring poet when she met Clyde in 1930. They fell in love and embarked on a 2-year crime spree across the South and Midwest with their gang. They robbed gas stations, small banks, and stores, rarely netting more than a few $100s. But they were willing to kill. They murdered at least 9 police officers and several civilians who got in their way. Their crimes were petty, but their fame was enormous. Newspapers romanticized them as rebels against the banks that had foreclosed on millions during the Depression. Bonnie posed for photos with guns and cigars. Clyde was fast behind the wheel, always escaping police roadblocks. In stolen Ford V8SJ Edgar Hoover made them public enemy number 1. On May 23, 1934, lawmen set up an ambush on a rural Louisiana road. When Bonnie and Clyde's car approached, officers opened fire without warning, unleashing 130 rounds in 16 seconds. The couple died instantly, their bodies riddled with bullets. Bonnie was 23, Clyde was 25. Despite their short, violent spree, they became American folk legends, symbols of doomed romance and rebellion against authority.